Ladies and gentlemen, and today we're looking at the mystery of the dead diesel. So, what do we know about this? Well, customer has his car, it's a 520D 2009, and it stopped starting. So he had a look into the engine ECU, possibly maybe checking fuses or the relay or whatever, and he found the ECU, and interestingly we can see the date there, 09/08/15. This is a 2015 ECU. And his car is obviously a 2009, so that's been replaced at some stage. And there we go. The ECU has handily written itself a little note: I have a fault, please bench test me and clone my data, which is something I'll get onto. If you're one of those observant people out there, you might have noticed something odd, which is this big massive red wire that is snaking around the outside. Now that connects off to the case, and that was connected up on the car, and it was connected up to a ground, not alive. It's a lovely bit of wire, even complete with we got red shrink wrap and everything on it, but it was being used as a ground. But that's a bit of a mystery, is why did we have an extra ground on this ECU? And I think there might be a reason for that, and it might be if someone touched that ECU to a positive and burnt out a ground pin. But first off, let's plug it in, let's power it up and see if it communicates. This ECU is an EDC17 CP02. No, it doesn't say it on the sticker anywhere. Commonly found on N47s. This one is out of an E60. There is a EDC17 C06. That was found in some smaller engines. I suppose, well, I say smaller, they're still 2 litres and so on, but with the solenoid injectors. So the extra P in CP02 is for piezo, as this is one of the piezo injector versions. So to try and communicate with this thing, we've got flex set up and connected through. As being a tri-core, there isn't really external memory chips we could unsolder and swap into anything else. If we want to get the information out of this, we need to go in through the main pins on the front and talk to it on CAN bus. So that means this whole ECU needs to be alive and awake for it to connect through and get our data out. So we need to save immobilizer codes and injector codes and that kind of stuff. And to be honest, we even need to figure out if any of this stuff is for his car, as this is a 2015 ECU, and I don't know if this has been cloned before or swapped and the immobilizer synced. So we're gonna have to have a look at the data once we get in. So we have our connections there. That's how we do it with flex. Obviously, it's one of those things, no one really remembers all these stuff off by heart. You do start getting familiar with them, but we have always little guides here. So this is through the bench mode connections. So we are going to go in now. First off, we have our power on, and we're going to hit connect and see if this thing connects. He's doing a lot of beeping. That's not normally a good sign. He's dead, Jim, but not as we know it. Okay, so now I'm going to go and have a look at our big red wire, as I'm going to check and see if that needs to have a ground on it. Well, what do you know? So I've got my multimeter poked into one of the ground connections there. Our positive lead onto there. Now that should be ground. It should be grounded, but we are reading 2 volts on there. So let me just try another. I'll hit another connect again, and we'll see if that actually jumps up to any power. Yes, it does. So now this is one of those things where it's not as crazy as it seems. You know, like, why is the case live? You shouldn't really think of it as being live. What you've got is voltage is being switched on and powered into things, but it has nowhere to go. it's expecting to go out to ground, but it isn't turning up on the ground. So we're going to go and connect that ground now back into our flex, and we'll see if it will start talking again. So I've stuck an auxiliary ground on. There's 2 ground pins we can take out of this. There's the wire going across and hooked onto there. Yeah, that's a little bit janky, but I didn't have anything there to sort of connect those 2 up. But that's holding them together. So now let's give it a shot and see if this will connect this time. We'll get down to our window. And is it going to make any chirping noise? It is. And there we go. So now our data's coming through. And let's have a look. We have, it doesn't say too much about that. Internal EEPROM memory configuration. Sometimes it'll mention stuff about checksums and so on. But he's communicating, and that's it. Checking password, okay, connect, finish, and that's it. It's alive. So first thing to do now that we have got him talking, we go for a full backup and we save absolutely everything we can out of this, and we'll have a look and see then at the data. All read and save all. So just before I go any further, I'm going to try now and communicate to him through the normal diagnostic way with my INPA lead. So we have flex set up now, and that's it. We need to move our CAN bus wires over to positions 1 and 2 rather than 5 and 6. So let's see now if we can talk to it and see what stories it can tell us. So I'm going to go in via E89 engine, automatic engine selection. This one, I know it's not an E89, but the automatic engine selection script is pretty handy, as that can find pretty much anything. So we are in, and let's have a look at our faults. So we have oil pressure, well, there's 20 of them in there in total. Oil pressure plausibility, coolant temperature unplugged, fuel temperature, boost. Generally what we're looking for is internal errors in this. Most of these codes are all coming up only seen once because it is powered up without them. So let's just check and make sure there's nothing totally crazy going on. That was a motor mount one. There is one ECU internal. So that's one there we're going to have a look at. We have apparently a hardware fault. That might be part of our issue. We'll have to see. And the rest of these codes seem to be the kind of stuff I'd expect anyway from an ECU just powered up with half the sensors unplugged. So we have one. Let's clean. Oh, we've stopped scrolling. Let's get back up. So we had one, an internal error. There it is. 4711. That's DDE ECU internal and Mo CSO PMM. Now what exactly that is, it's hard to tell, but it does say hardware fault, watchdog overwatch module. So something's going on with that. And now, before we dive too deep, we have our second spare ECU powered up. Again, in through the INPA leads and so on. And interestingly, I do see the same 4711 fault code. So I believe that might be something to do with the power control, because I'm powering it up, but I essentially forcing the power on myself rather than getting it to switch on other bits and pieces there through a DDE relay. So that might be where that con comes from, as I have seen that before on some other ECUs I've been working on when I've been checking through them, and hasn't always seemed to cause any issues. So assuming that this one's good, we're going to go through and we're going to start having a look now into the cloning side. I did have a look at the original, and in the data there I could see the VIN number did match for a 2009 520D, so that was certainly a change. And we also saw a programming date of 2023, so that might be when the ECU was replaced at some point and reprogrammed, and it looks like it probably could have been working for some of that time. And now I'm just going to take a backup of this before I go any further, just so I can always return this to a known working good version if our software starts playing up. As it is a slightly different part number, from what I've checked they should be compatible, but we should be able to check, as we know how this one responds on the original software, and we do have that 4711 fault code, and we're going to see once we copy stuff over what it's like after that. So back there into Flex, and we go up and we do our connect. I have already moved our CAN wires back over to 5 and 6, and now we'll see if this will connect. So again, we don't need to do any of that crazy grounding of the case, as this one is all working as it should. So there it is, it's scanning through our details now and our memory configuration. So it's getting all our data, and we're going to make a backup of that now and keep a hold of it. And because I'm nosy, I decided to have a look inside the file and see what's going on. So this is from our original ECU, and I'm looking here at the UIF section. So these little sections here, they get wrote into the ECU when it's programmed, and we have NFS01, which means it was done by WinKFP in that instance. And then the second one we have 12345. That there would have been the dealer number, which you can edit in there. Normally WinKFP, or I guess the factories, just stick in NFS for new flash system. If it was redone at a dealer, that would have been the dealer number. But 12345 is just the default one. So we have two UIFs in here. There is our VIN. We can see in the ASCII side, which is encoded here in hex, and then just after this bit here is the programming date. So we can see 2009-09-02. So that's when this ECU was first programmed, and there's our second UIF at 2023-02-18. That was the second time it was reprogrammed. So if this was first reprogrammed in 2009 and our ECU is from 2015, this likely then has been cloned out of the original. So it does seem that whoever worked on this before had cloned it. There's nothing like it's going to be from a 320D and maybe just the immobilizer taken off and thrown together and all working. It looks like whoever has done some work on this before has kind of done it properly, and they did clone the original one. I will need to check on the VIN number. I don't know the VIN number of this particular car. That registration there, that's just going to be whatever came out the breakers, so that's not going to be the correct one either. Well, in fact, again, it's a 57 plate when we're dealing with a 2009 car. So there is our data. So yep, this at least now will save his bits and pieces. I could see EGR off, possibly DPF, possibly some tuning in there. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because, again, that's not part of my job. My job is just to clone it. So we're going to do a clone now by writing our full MMF backup from our original into our donor ECU, and then we're going to check it again and see how it's working. We got our MMF full backup, and we just hit program, and that will automatically go through and do everything that's needed. Now, I can't be certain that these are the kind of things where you can just copy everything out of one into another. I don't know if Flex sprinkles on a bit of special sauce onto this thing when it's doing it, but however it does it, it works out all fine. So I've done plenty of these clones, and all I do is just automatically take the MMF backup and stick it into another one, and that works fine on the BMWs. On VWs, you will need to send your files to Flex, and they'll prepare something for you and maybe other ECUs you might need to check what's going on with those. But certainly on the BMW ones with flex, you can just do a full backup out of one, stick it into another. Certainly on these EDC17, certainly on all of the E series stuff, pretty much all of the F series. I don't think I've come across an F series that won't do it. Not sure on all the G ones just yet, but as far as I'm aware, it does work on those as well. He's now completed, and we have a little success bar at the top, and I'm pretty confident. These things, they always work out fairly well. So I'm now going to go and check him over through the INPA lead and OBD and make sure it's all behaving itself as expected. So that all seems happy and alive now. When you do a clone, it does copy over everything. So the bits that you would really vitally need, which is the correct maps and so on, so it is set up for the correct car, that's all copied over. We have the VIN numbers, we have the immobilizer code, which again is going to be sort of fairly vital. Handy things then like injector coding is copied over, so you don't need to go and redo the injector codes, but also all of the fault codes. So you need to be aware of that kind of stuff and not panic if you had an ECU that had a particular fault and you clone it and then you see the same fault on the new one. That might be just because you copied the memory across. And we do see our same old 4711 ECU internal, but again, because I've seen it on a couple of them now, I'm not going to be all that worried. I'm just going to put that down to something to do with the power control that's confusing the ECU. It's not sure how it's awake and alive right now without the correct wiring going into it, because we've got it all connected up through these pins. So that all seems to be a success. So I'm going to unhook this one, and we're then going to have a look back at our original. So we're with the original now, and that I'm sure is our smoking gun. That little mark that you see where it all looks a little bit cratered, I believe that's where something touched this and shorted it out. And when that happens, it would have tried to ground itself all the way through the ECU. I'm reckoning it possibly burnt out a pin inside. So I'm going to pull this apart now, because I'm nosy. I'm going to have a bit of a look and see if I can find out where it is. So there we go, screws out for summer, but we still have our lid on and it is still glued here, so that means it hasn't been opened up before. So to open them up, I'm going to have to pry them from this corner. Now start on that side away from the glue strip, and when you're levering, down on the outside, up on the tip, because you don't want to scratch across the board. So I'm going to get the lid off on this, and I'll probably need both hands for this one, so let me just get this done now. And there's our first look in. So we have our tri-core processor up the back. Now that's one of these ones where we have all the pins on the outside. A lot of these now, certainly more the modern ones, they're all ball grid array, so you won't see the legs on the side, they'll all be underneath. But over here, I don't particularly see anything too unusual. I certainly don't see anything that seems to be burnt out at the moment, looking at first glance at least. These here would have been our ground pins coming in from outside, and I don't see anything sort of burnt around there or anything along this trace, but somewhere along here there is obviously something that's cutting the ground on this ECU. So I'm happy now with all of that. It's passed the visual inspection. I've checked these diodes that we have over here. None of those are shorted. And to be honest, if there was, we'd see higher current drains, and it wouldn't be just, I suppose, a simple case of grounding the case to get him to work. So I'm going to dig him out further now and look on the other side. So this is something that I wouldn't normally recommend. This bit down here with these fins, again, that's a heatsink, and this bit down here, there's glue patches behind there and there where our PCB is glued down into the case. Same with this here. So that's like a thermal contact glue, which allows sort of the heat to spread out into the back aluminium case and it to cool itself down a little bit. The strips that we have, one of them is on the back of these, so that's for cooling of these chips, and then the other one runs across here and would cool these chips including there's a possibility of having another chip up there that does something. These are sort of fairly hefty power control chips. So to get him out then, we need a bit of levering. Now this one, because we have the legs on the side of it, it's not as bad, but when you do have ball grid array stuff, any flexing of the board can be a real pain in the arse, because you've got these two things are separated by a whole bunch of tiny little balls underneath, and any kind of flexing of the board, but that chip doesn't flex, puts stress on all of those legs underneath, and they can crack. So I would always recommend avoid having to take them out of this. You know, don't go flipping them over and trying to pull them out to have a look on the other side just for fun. Only do it if you've got a real, you know, a real need or some sort of emergency that requires you to do that, and make sure you've got everything saved beforehand, because you never know, you can take one of these things out, put it back together again, and then find the whole thing doesn't work. So I'm going to start on this edge now. This is going to be the first glue strip. This one will be right onto the glue. So I'm going to start at this edge, try and pull him up. We got more of a leverage onto that glue. Then once this one starts to give up, we'll have even more leverage to slowly pull him up against that back one, as levering there is going to be a bit tricky. So you need as many screwdrivers as you can get your hands on, and then it's a case of having to get in and try and lift him up a little bit, and then I get a screwdriver underneath, get him up a little, and then keep on going down our line, trying to get just a little bit of prying up without going too much in one area, so it'll come up as nice and safe as possible. This bit here is a good area to lever in, because you know there's not going to be anything on the other side of that. And I can hear him starting to lift up now a little bit. And it's often quite a case of just some steady pressure on this thing. If I can get a good bite of this with a screwdriver, and then let the glue just sort of tear by itself. So I finished it off on my lap. It's a lot easier when you got a bit more control, and you can sort of lean your body into it and hold it in different spots, as you do need about 4 hands to do this. But we have him stripped out now. You also need to lever on these sides, because there is a glue strip that runs around the front. So now we'll have our big reveal, and we'll turn him around and we'll have a look. So there's our ECU, and I can already see the problem. And there is our damage. So if I zoom in, those there is 3 of them in a line. They're going to be our ground pins, and you can see how they've melted themselves, almost kind of like blown out like a fuse. So we obviously have this one here at the front, there's one in just there behind, and even further back, it's very hard to see, there's another one in there. So all 3 of those were common grounds, and all of those are burnt out. There is a little scorch mark I see there on the traces. Let me get something to poke at that with. Where are we? There we go, just there. But that might have just been like a blob of molten metal flicking out and dropping onto that. It is a sort of a scorch mark, but I don't think it was anything arcing between those 2 traces. I think that might have been just something, a little blob of hot molten metal dropping off and burning off a little bit of the coating on the top. So that is what's happened then. So because those 3 pins are a solid ground direct to the battery, I suppose you could imagine, as soon as that case touched the power, it grounded everything through there. And for, I don't know how long that would have been. I mean, to do all 3 of them, I guess it would have taken quite some time to melt through all of those. But it's gone and melted all of those and burnt them out kind of like a fuse. And I guess a lot of the rest of this stuff has survived, since it would still work and talk, but obviously we still have some issues, since obviously we had a no start in the first place. So that is our problem, and all caused by touching the ECU case against a battery positive or alive somewhere around the ECU box. This little city in the middle is going to be the high voltage side for the piezo injectors. So as I said, this was a CP02, and the CPs have piezo injectors and they run at higher voltages. So this is going to be transformers and big storage capacitors to build up the voltage to trigger those piezo injectors. The piezo injectors, they work on little stacks of quartz crystals and they need quite a voltage. They're not just a regular 12 volt stuff. So I'm gonna give this a quick stab at fixing this. So I've got generally the job at hand done, but I wonder if I can get in there and actually repair this one as well. So I'm going to see if I can make those sort of connections. The first two, I'm pretty confident that wouldn't be too much of an issue, but the one at the back is going to be pretty tight, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get into that. So I've bent the outermost two out of the way, but we still have that one at the back, and he's quite far in there. So what I'm going to try and do is reach in with a small soldering iron and see if I can solder a wire onto that and bring him out so I got a little bit more working space. So I ended up cutting away a bit of plastic. I say cutting, it's more like carving it away with a soldering iron, but it was very tight to get in there with the wire and the soldering iron, but we got in there to the back, and I have this wire soldered on and he's nice and tight. So now we're going to carry on with the rest, and I'm going to pull out the stubs of those two remaining pins. Well, we got the pin legs out now. That is quite a thick board and it's a pretty wide hole, but we got him out and we got the holes cleared. So now we've got to carry on with our patching up, and this is how I'm going to do it. So I'm going to make this bit of solid copper wire. I've got him into the right shape to fit into those holes. I'm going to solder our wire that I've added onto the third pin onto the leg of this, fit this in, and then I'm going to obviously have this section of copper wire which is going to be used as the connection point for the remaining two legs. That is our copper bus bar in there, and what I've done is I had to give a bit of a pinch on our purple extra ground to give him a bit of clearance, as I wanted to get him away from the copper wire, as that's going to get hot on the soldering. So he's soldered now through on the other side. I can see the solder has come through onto this side, and now we want to connect up these two pins back onto it. So I'm going to move them around. You can see there, that's me. I ended up so almost cutting through that thing, trying to hold on to it. There's a few nicks in there, trying to hold on to it and bend it back into a shape where I got it down so it's pretty much touching that copper bar, and I know there's not going to be much in the way of pressures or tension in it pulling away. So I want to get that sitting as close as I can to it and get the solder on, get that one connected, and then we've got the final one to do afterwards. And there we go. So what I've done now is I've got our two legs soldered on to our U-shaped ground bus bar. That was a bit tricky. I had to break out this stuff, the soldering acid. So although the end of those pins looked very much like copper, they possibly could have been copper, but I think they were oxidized copper, and we couldn't really get the solder to stick. So that soldering acid is pretty strong stuff, and that cut through the oxidation and got our solder then to properly tin the remains of those legs and get him onto our bus bar there. And these are pretty solid. I'm properly cranking on these things, and I got more chance of breaking the tweezers than snapping these things off. So that's them on. So what I'm going to do now, bolt him back up together and see if he's still going to talk. And of course it's back alive again. So we just have our regular connections in. We don't have our extra crazy ground into the chassis. We've got our ugly looping wires in there, but that's him all done. And then we go into input and we can see he's alive and talking. So there we have 14 volts coming through out of the flex control, various other bits and pieces. These are all just going to show as just junk really, as none of this stuff is plugged in. We have a kilometer reading stored out of this, a runtime in seconds as well. And let's have a look back into our faults. We had 20. I think we'll still have 20, as I think there's only a certain number we can have. Oil pressure, plausibility, that's probably not a good one, to be honest. That is oil pressure switch, right? Okay. And let's scroll down through these and see if there's anything else new or amazing turned in. Everything here sort of seems fairly common, the usual kind of stuff I'd be expecting. Our internal error, there he is again, only shows as being once, but everything I've done so far has that one. Timeouts on LIN bus, timeouts on LIN bus again. That's the LIN bus is going to be for oil level sensors and glow plugs and so on. And that's it. So it all seems to be alive. So there we go, reanimated and back from the dead. So that wasn't really the job that I was planning to do. My main job was just to do the cloning, but you know, when you see something like this, it's always a bit of fun to try and figure out what went wrong. But we found all the bits and pieces from, I suppose, the original clue of it needing an extra ground, suggesting that something happened. The spark on the outside, again suggesting that it had been shorted, and of course our burnt wires and melted out pins on the inside. And with them all repaired, we have the whole lot working. So that's it, that one's done. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.